And now it's time for Mob Talk Radio with your host, Jeff Canarsie.
And welcome to Mob Talk Radio. I am your host, Jeff Canarsie. We got a big show today. We got some Q&A. We're going to talk about Ciro Terranova and just a couple other things. But before we get into the show, I seem to get one particular question a lot from people. And what are the major differences between what's going on today in the organized crime and what took place yesteryear, back in the 40s, the 60s, what have you? It's a different time period, and the best way that I can describe this, and I was describing this to a friend of mine the other night, is that if you go back in time and you look in even the 1920s through the Great Depression and everything that happened there, when these guys came over to this country, they didn't have a pot to piss in. Usually they were large Italian families. They had a lot of mouths to feed. There wasn't a lot of work. It definitely was not a single income excuse me, it definitely was not a single income type of situation that could get them sort of out of the poverty levels. And so a lot of these guys turned to crime because it was the ends to justify the means. I don't think, and there's probably some that made a conscious thought of, fuck this, I'm going to go break some laws and do what I got to do. There are some that are like that, but there's some that circumstance sort of determined that that's what they were going to have to do. And that's why a lot of these guys in the old days did what they did. They needed to rise above the poverty level. They were tired of not eating, so they decided to make a judgment call on themselves. They go out, they do what they do, and many of them became very wealthy. But today's gangsters, and it's without reproach, and it's without chastising them. I don't know their situation. But if you're raised in a middle income, above the poverty line type of situation, there really is no need for it. And I call it the silver spoon effect. A lot of guys, and I'm not saying names or pointing this in any direction, but a lot of these guys grew up in good homes, came from good parents, came from good situations, and they choose to join that way of life. And that's their choice. I mean, everybody's allowed to do what they want to do, but there's a huge difference between having to do it because you're going to starve to death versus doing it because you're fucking bored and you want to make money and be greedy and whatever. And I'm not, and I know it's going to happen when I just said that. People are going to come back to me and say, oh, look at him now. Now he's like blasting anybody involved in that. I'm not. I'm just simply saying that the difference between 1940 and today, there's a big difference. The ends always justify the means, no matter how you break it down. But in those days, they had to. They had no fucking choice. They could have been fishmongers or whatever the fuck, and slowly got themselves out of the ghettos. But they didn't. They chose to take a run at whatever they needed to do to get the hell out of the situation they were in. And I think putting yourself in that situation, given the time period, we're not talking welfare here. They didn't have welfare then. You never knew where your next meal was coming from. So they had to do what they had to do. And that's why a lot of these guys didn't become rats. They didn't tell on nobody. They entered into something fully well cognizant of what was going to happen, what the penalties for things were. And that's what they did. Today, different. These guys didn't grow up in the slums. These guys didn't grow up during Prohibition. They didn't grow up during the Great Depression. They didn't grow up under ration stamps, under World War I, or under World War II. They have no concept of that. So there's a major difference. And I think that a lot of people like to say to me all the time, and then I'm going to get to some other stuff, is that do I think that the old world mentality was the best mentality for that life? And I think it was. I think when you bring in old world values and you isolate yourself, this is one thing that the Italians do very well in other countries, is they stick to their roots. They stick to the foundation of their ethnicity. loose lips sink ships, that kind of stuff. And I think that the Americanized version of it is a lot different these days. And so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the parallels are totally wrong here, but I think that there's a huge difference between time periods and what's going on. I think law enforcement, especially looking back, and this is to give the guys that are in now kind of a break, is that law enforcement was completely different back in the 30s, the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and 50s, 60s, etc. They didn't have cameras in every corner. They didn't have fucking drones. They didn't fucking have cell phones. So the thing is that for anything to adapt, anything that has to evolve, has to find a way around that kind of stuff. And that's what the mob has ended up doing. But the glory days are gone as far as casinos and all that kind of stuff. That's all heyday type of stuff. But I think that's the real difference between then and now. I just think that there isn't really necessarily a necessity to break the law to make ends meet. People make a conscious choice to do it, even when they didn't grow up with that type of mentality. And that sort of leads me to what I wanted to talk about at the opening of this, before we get to questions and then Ciro Terranova, is what's going on in Canada. I get a lot of questions about what's going on in Canada, and one thing that people don't seem to understand is Canada is set up a lot like Europe. The way that criminal organizations work there are highly different than they are here. Same structure, same type of extortion, money laundering, racketeering, same sort of crimes, murder. But they're sort of like a throwback to 1960 with the way they're killing each other there. And what the real problem has become is obviously, I've talked about the Rizzuto crime family, which has been decimated from within for the most part. But you still have other core groups that are there, and it seems like the main battleground has really become the Toronto area. There's a reason for that. One, anything that connects the border from Toronto, Canada to the United States is going to be big. It's going to be big for cigarette smuggling. It's going to be big for narcotics trafficking and other stuff. But the one thing that not many people seem to mention when it comes to Canada is the biker gangs, the Hells Angels, the Banditos, and some of these other groups. And what I don't think people get is that when you have multiple organized crime families, and we're not talking one or two, we're talking about like 7, 8, 9 different clans, 3 different families. There's a lot of fucking organized crime going on there. And the thing is that they're not just fighting battles within their own family, but they're fighting each other. And then you add the Hells Angels on top of that, and it just creates even more havoc. And guys are fighting over turf. The Toronto area was long belonged to the Rizzuto crime family, but there has been something that's been going on there, and it hasn't been reported, at least not in the United States. So I thought that I would sort of cover that. In the last few months, there have been at least 6 attacks on Hells Angels turf in Ontario, in the Gatineau area of Quebec. There's also been what's been happening is people have been using Molotov cocktails and blowing up buildings. A tattoo shop, which was owned by a Hells Angel from the Woodbridge chapter, and then another Hells Angel member who was a senior member, his massage parlor was also firebombed in London, Ontario. Then there was a cottage that was owned by another senior Hells Angel, which was totally blown up. And so what you're saying is, and yeah, we can say that the Mafia is behind that, or we could say it's other motorcycle gangs and etc. But the point is they're fighting, and that is some dangerous stuff. Look, Ontario on its own has 15 Hells Angels chapters. We're not talking 1, not 2, 15. That is like fucking insane. And once again, Ontario was always the Rizzuto territory, but the problem is the Rizzutos are fighting from within now. There's also outside factions that are, whatever's left of the Catroni crime family is still poking at the Rizzutos, and that's history that's going back decades. But what you have going on is there's an issue that's brewing, and it's brewing between the Hells Angels and the mob. It's not just isolated to the Rizzutos, but it's also it's also isolated to other subgroups like Ndrangheta and other groups. The turf war is essentially over narcotics and cigarette smuggling. What a lot of people don't understand, and this will go back to like the 1980s. I'm going to use Dino Bravo as a reference. His real name was Alfredo Bresciano. You might know him as Dino Bravo, the pro wrestler that was in WWF back in the time. Now it's WWE. He was related to the Catroni crime family through marriage. He got into cigarette smuggling because that was a high dollar, make a lot of money type of enterprise back in the late 80s, early 90s. And one of the things that a lot of people get this wrong, but they say he was drug trafficking, and he wasn't. He was into the cigarette smuggling. What ended up happening to him is that he encroached on the reservations, the Native American reservations, which were long considered to be Rizzuto territory and other people's territory. He also wasn't kicking back his full share, and that creates a problem, and that's exactly why Dino Bravo was shot and killed in his own house in Laval. But that's the type of stuff that I'm talking about. Cigarette smuggling is a big operation there, and everybody is trying to obviously control it. If you look at just Ontario, you have the Musitano crime family, which is Calabrian, who is also aligned with the Buffalo crime family out of Hamilton. You got the Papilla crime family, which is also Calabrian, who is also aligned with the Buffalo crime family based in Hamilton. You have the Lupino crime family, which is also Calabrian, who's also aligned with the Buffalo crime family based out of Hamilton. You have the Saderno CF, which is basically an Andrangheta group, but there's 7 clans. And we talk about clans a lot on this show. And for what you need to understand about how this operates is you take the Gambinos. They're a mob family. Clans are different. These are loose, tight-knit groups with 30, 40 members, and they're all over the place. And they spread like wildfire, like cancer. And so the fact that there's 3 or 4 crime families, the fact that there's 7 clans that are operating out of Toronto, it's once again a situation where everybody's fighting over whatever small racket, whatever turf. And as you notice, the RCMP, Canadian law enforcement, is really having a tough time cracking these guys. And it's because they're so insulated. Imagine, it's like putting 5,000 people, 5,000 gangsters in Brooklyn and giving them like a 5-mile radius to work. That's how big what's going on in Canada is. In Quebec, you have the Catronis, you have the Contrera Coruna, which is another mafia clan. You have the Rizzutos. But then this is what you have for bikers, and I'm just trying to sort of emphasize what's going on. You have the Bacchus, you have the Bad Disciples, you have the Banditos, who have 2,400 members, 210 chapters in 22 countries, the Grim Reapers, the Loners, who actually converged with the Banditos, the Rebels, the Outlaws, the Hells Angels, 34 chapters, 460 men throughout Canada. It's just absolutely, there's 15 chapters of Hells Angels in Ontario, 8 in British Columbia, 5 in Quebec, 3 in Alberta, 2 in Saskatchewan, and 1 in Manitoba. Satan's Choice. There's all kinds of different motorcycle groups there, and that's the point I'm trying to get to with this, is that you look at somebody like the Rizzuto crime family, who at one point was the most powerful global mob family in the world. And we've seen, obviously, through history what's happened to them. But when you mix in all the biker gangs and everybody's fighting over for border control, narcotics, guns, trafficking, whatever it is that they're doing, these mob clans are also fighting each other. And so the ones that really kind of are going to win out of this are going to be the motorcycle groups who just sit back and let these guys shoot each other. Now, I don't know if any of those firebombing events had anything to do with the Mafia, or whether it had to do with other mob families or not. But I think the point is that that's why you're seeing murder in Canada every day. Every day somebody's getting shot and killed. And the reason why that's happening is because they're fighting over territory. Everybody wants to control. The Rizzutos no longer have any sort of final say, so to speak. Back in the day, they had final say. They controlled everything. They got rid of the Catronis. And these people are coming back now. And so I think that that's why you're going to continue to see mob hits because everybody's jockeying for position. Everybody, all the 7 clans and Drangheta clans that are out there, the Calabrians, the Sicilians, the Neapolitans, they're all, the Camorra, they're all going to like jockey for position. And whoever takes that over, they all want to take it over and be the head fuckers. Once they do that, then they can address the biker situation, which I don't think that they could eradicate that whatsoever, but they can have working relationships that are functional with everybody. But that's why you're seeing what's going on there, and it's a lot like Europe. And if you're unfamiliar with what I am talking about, go on to, I want to say like Google or whatever, and look at the structure. There's a couple of like informational maps that will, and I'm not sure how accurate it is, but it will show you where every mob clan in Italy is, their strongholds, and this is obviously via what law enforcement believes to be the case. So some of it may be partially correct, some of it may not be, but you'll be amazed at just the small cliques. It's almost like a splinter cell of terrorists. I'm not calling them terrorists, I'm just saying, but it's like a splinter cell. They're all over the place. So that's what's going on in Canada. As far as, let's see, anything over here I need to talk about because... okay, yeah, I'll address this really quick, and then we'll get on to your questions in the rest of the show. I got a fucking message from somebody who doesn't like me. First of all, whoever this guy is, because they all use fake names, doesn't like the fact that I talk about people I don't like, doesn't like the fact that I talk about my personal life, doesn't like... First of all, let's get this out of the way. It's my show. I'm going to do what I want. If you don't like it, just turn the fucking station. Turn the volume down. You sending me a message saying, I can't stand your show past 20 minutes because you talk about yourself. Nobody gives a fuck about you, blah, blah, blah. What do you say to somebody like that? Obviously, if they had another show to go listen to, which they obviously don't, they wouldn't send this shit to me. I'm never going to... Look, the bottom line is this. I'm never going to stop defending people that I know. I'm never going to stop sticking up for people that I know that are being treated unfair by other journalists. I'm not going to allow lying rat fucks to just lie about everybody and not have your Jerry Capicis or your George Anastasias or your Dave Ratweisers. They don't defend nobody. They're like ticks. They jump on the dog that's weak and they just suck off of him to make money. I mean, that's the bottom line. And so from my perspective, if I see something that's lopsided, I'm going to defend them. That's who I am. Maybe you don't like who you are and your station of life, but that's who I am. That's who I've always been. And so if you think I'm going to stop defending people, you're out of your fucking mind. It's never going to happen. But I do agree that I could tone it down a little bit sometimes. So I'll meet somebody halfway, because meeting somebody halfway is a good thing for me. But if I stop defending people, what the fuck is the point? What the fuck is the point? Because you know what? Here's the thing that people don't realize, and then I'm going to shut up about it, is that 90% of my audience has no idea who I am. They don't know my background. They never met me. They never sat at a table with me. But there is a collection of people that do know me very well. And they'll be the first to tell you. If he stops defending people, then he's no longer being who he is. And you can claim it, this is an act and all of this, and I fake anger. Listen, you obviously don't know me. And there's been people that I've met, authors that have written some big books that I've met that find me kind of likable. So you got to understand, there is a character that is very much a part of what I do, but it's still who I am. I will amplify certain things because it's entertaining. Okay, so if you're asking yourself, oh, is this guy real? Yeah, I'm very real. Anybody that's met me will verify that I'm definitely real. And who you're hearing is me, but, come on, I play around with stuff a little bit. It's just a reality of life. If I sat here all monotone talking like this, you'd be fucking bored out of your mind. If I didn't talk shit about Mikey Francis or some of these rat bastards, what the fuck would you listen for? You can look up all this historical shit on your own. You don't need me fucking barking it. So the idea here is I'm not going to change. If you don't like it, don't fucking listen. It's that simple. I don't get bothered by people that have that opinion. I love people that want to argue with me. Those are my favorite people because that tells me how happy Because you know what? The motherfuckers are going to hate you all day long. They're going to listen every week. What's this asshole, cocksucker, piece of shit going to say this week? It's going to piss me off and have me breaking shit in my house. Maybe you need some medication. All right, so all that being said, we got a lot of questions to burn through, and the questions were actually really, really good. They're always really good, but this week they were phenomenally good. Sometimes I get asked the same stuff. It gets a little boring talking about the same stuff, but I understand not everybody is up to date. But let's go ahead and jump right in. Even though he was already hated, would there have been any sort of retribution from the commission if someone were to have killed Joe Bonanno with an unsanctioned hit? That's a really, really good question. I think, using my best judgment here, I think if the mob was going to try to save face, if the mob was going to try to appeal to his son, Salvatore, Bill Bonanno, I think that they would. But then there's this other side of me that kind of thinks they were so fucking fed up, maybe the person would do them a favor. So, first of all, I don't think there would have... You know what? Who knows? I think, okay, the best way I can answer this is by saying this. The mob wanted him dead anyway. They wanted him gone. So if somebody did them a favor, would they have probably acted in retribution? I think they would have, on one basis. And that one basis would have been to make it look like it was unsanctioned, which it obviously we're talking about it being, because the mob would have to sort of take a stance with the government and the police watching, saying, okay, this was done by an outside person, this wasn't our call, so we're going to kill whoever did it. I think that's the reason why they would do it, but I think anything short of that, I don't think they'd pay any attention. I think that they would be upset only in the instance if Joe Bonanno was in good standing and if he was still controlling the family in a profitable manner and not creating all the headaches that he was creating. So I think from that perspective, if Joe Bonanno was in better terms, yeah, absolutely they would fire off some retribution. But in this case, anything short of the police, I really don't think that somebody would have been doing them a great favor. The headache's fucking gone. So that's my opinion. I could be wrong. Okay. Did Ronnie and Reggie Cray have meetings with the mob as portrayed in the film Legend? No, absolutely not. Listen, people that live in Europe obviously know the Ronald and Reggie Cray story better than I do. I am not up to speed on British gangsters. However, I do know a little bit about them. However, the only American mafia contact that they really had came through a guy named Bert Rossi. And Bert Rossi was basically a narcotics trafficker. He was friends with Angelo Bruno, Meyer Lansky, Carlo Gambino. He was also a hitman for the American mob. He actually protected Rocky Marciano when Marciano went to London. He claims that he was asked to kill Roy DeMeo but refused because he was old and couldn't do it anymore. I don't believe anything Bert Rossi has to say as far as the Roy DeMeo thing, but Bert Rossi was a hitman for the American mob. But as far as Legend, I haven't honestly seen that film, so I don't want to say anything bad about it, but what I can tell you is that Ronnie and Reggie Cray never had a single meeting with an American mobster in their life. That much has been inflated, and I think that the reason why British filmmakers will sort of push that narrative is because I think that they think that gives them some sort of validity. I don't think Ronald and Reggie Cray needed any sort of fucking validity at all. They were tough guys. They were gangsters. They didn't hesitate. They ran everything. So I don't think that they need the American mob sort of as a buffer to make them tough. And I think that's the mistake that British filmmakers make. You can be a gangster and not have affiliations with a million other organized crime groups. They were I call them the gruesome twosome. And that's what they were. So I think the mistake that European filmmakers make is they try to use the American mob to try to validate somebody. And I think that that's just the wrong thing to do. All right, how connected was Frank Sinatra's best friend, Jilly Rizzo? Jilly Rizzo was a tough guy. Obviously, if you don't know who Jilly Rizzo was, you can look him up. But he was a saloon owner, a restaurateur. He was Frank Sinatra's really go-to guy for when Sinatra was having problems. As far as being connected, he was very tight with the Gambinos. He was very tight with the Colombos. Jilly Rizzo was just tight sort of with everybody. In 1990, he was actually convicted with 5 others for an $8 million fraud and loan scheme, and he ended up only getting 1,000 hours of community service. When you take a guy off the streets of Brooklyn who does an $8 million fraud loan scheme, what does he get? 30 fucking years. So Obviously, I think that there was some money dropped in that situation. Some have even speculated that Jilly Rizzo was killed. In 1992, he was hit by a drunk driver, and he ended up burning to death in his car. I don't believe that he was murdered. It was an accident, and that's just sort of the way I go with it. But Jilly Rizzo really acted as the go-between Sinatra and the mob for a long time. And it's not to say that Sinatra couldn't sit down and have a conversation with the gangster, because he did it all the time. But for instances like the Westchester event, where Carlo Gambino, the heads of the Mafia, show up to a Sinatra benefit, Jilly Rizzo's the guy that the mob people go through to let Sinatra know they're going to be there, to let Sinatra know that they want to come backstage and hang out. And a lot of that was because of the shit that happened out in Vegas when the FBI put Giancana, and this happened at the Cal Neva, which is what Sinatra owned out in Palm, right on the line between Nevada and Palm Springs. Or excuse me, between Nevada and California. My bad. And so Giancana was constantly there banging the whores. John F. Kennedy was there. But it created a lot of problems for Sinatra, and it affected his gaming license down the line. And so what Sinatra really tried to do towards the end, he was always respectful, and he always said he owed the Mafia for his career. Because when nobody would hire him, when nobody would have anything to do with him, they're the ones that made sure he got put out in front, made sure he had concert dates. They helped resurrect his career and gave him his career for the most part. So he always felt that he was indebted to them. But the one thing that he didn't want to do was be sort of seen out in public meeting the heads, because he knew, A, that created problems for them because of who Frank was. And I just think Frank was concerned about his sort of career. Let's be honest. And this is something that nobody has ever said that you're going to hear from me now. And it's something that doesn't make me happy, because I'm a huge Sinatra fan. But actually, back in the 1960s, when the FBI was watching Sinatra, he actually offered the FBI this. He said, if you ever need any help, and I don't mind helping America, if you need information about anybody, you come to me and I'll tell you whatever you need to know. Now, the Sinatra family has not spoken about this. They refuse to even acknowledge it. And the fact that this is a published FBI memorandum, it could be one of two things. One, we cannot believe it and say it's bullshit, the FBI is just playing games, which really I don't believe that to be the case. This took place after Frank Sinatra Jr. was kidnapped, which he really wasn't kidnapped. That's a fucking joke. I could get into that all day. But I think that just offering to help them is a fucking rat move. All right. But for devil's advocate argumentative sake, maybe Sinatra, and keep in mind that after this, Sinatra had all kinds of problems with the FBI. The Cal Neva, the stuff at the Sands, he had a lot of problems with the federal government. They went after him. And so even if he offered it, maybe it was tongue-in-cheek, maybe it was designed to get them off his fucking back. I'm not sure. I didn't come across that document until it was about a week ago I came across it. It absolutely broke my fucking heart. Because Sinatra was always, to me, a legend. And that doesn't take away from his ability and talent as a singer. But to me, that's sort of like, is a rat move. And I don't get it. These guys gave him everything, and he was willing to tell on them? For what? To get the FBI off his back? So, I'm not sure. You know, obviously I wasn't there, and that's why I want to preface this. If I was sitting there and I heard the conversation, then there's nothing I can say. I got to verify it. Sinatra could be a fucking rat. The problem is, I wasn't sitting there. I was not privy to that information. Things, we know this, we've talked about it, 302s get manipulated. So I can have an argument for this is real and an argument for this is bullshit. So I think ultimately, at the end of the day, it'll be left up to historians to kind of figure that out. But he continued to past that one instance. He continued his relationship with the Mafia for the rest of his life. So obviously, And listen, the mob was really good at getting information back in those days, so I'm sure they were sort of aware of what was going on. And obviously, the mob really didn't have a love affair with Dean Martin, and that's the truth. And the reason why is Sinatra catered to them. Dean Martin loathed them. He couldn't stand them. And at one point, the mob had even talked to Giancana had even talked about killing Dean Martin just because he felt like Dean Martin was disrespectful and didn't respect them enough and didn't help them enough. And so, then there was the whole issue between Sammy Davis Jr. And My Brit, who was white and he was black. They had an issue with that. And they tried to leverage Sinatra into getting, and the studio heads tried to leverage Sinatra to get them to bust up that marriage because they didn't want to see a black guy marry a white woman and all that garbage that goes back to the 60s. But the end result is that you guys can decide what you think about Sinatra as far as that goes. Okay, next question. Why do lies and rumors persist and the true history gets lost in translation? Who do you believe, the cops or the gangsters? You're asking me that question. Who do I believe, the cops or the gangsters? Listen, a lot of people lie. A lot of people manipulate the facts. I'll be the first to tell you. When I got in trouble, I tried to lie. I told them whatever the fuck I thought that they needed to hear to just leave me the fuck alone. Was it the right thing to do? No, because morally, I can argue it either way. But when you're involved with people, you play dumb. That's what you do. You play dumb. Their job is to arrest you. Their job is to put you in prison. Their job is to convict you. Your job ain't to give them what they fucking want. You make it tough on them. My grandfather once told me, he says, you know what cops do their job? Their job is to go and arrest bad people and do what they do. And other guys who live on the streets, their job is to avoid that at all cost. So from my perspective, who do I believe? The cops or the gangsters? I'm never going to believe a cop. And there are good cops. I'm not going to lie. There's good cops. But, I also know how things work. For anybody to look me straight in the eye and say that there's one cop that's completely uncorruptible, for anybody to look at me and say there is one cop out there that's totally honest, nobody in this life is totally honest. And I'm not knocking the cops. I'm just saying nobody is honest. There is not a single fucking person on this planet that's 100% honest. Everybody fucking lies. Everybody lies. You can call them little white lies, stretching of the truth, but it's still lies. People lie when they have to fucking insulate themselves from something, be it getting hurt, be it a relationship, be it crime. You got to do what you got to do. So the reason why rumors keep persisting is because the truth is fucking boring. It's like I could tell you a story about my life, right? And maybe it's a crime story, right? And it's about 5 minutes long, and it's sort of drab. I'm going to interject some stuff. I'm going to give it some steroids to make it sound more entertaining, because that's what I do. I like to entertain people. Doesn't mean I'm lying, but I will use different words to describe the situation and the scene. The problem is like a lot of these reporters and a lot of these book writers, they're not getting, their information is coming from bottom of the barrel people, rats. The second thing is the majority of what they do produce, they get from court transcripts. Now, let me use this as an example. I could text Daryl Vanover, a buddy of mine. I could text him, and he just reads the words. I'm just talking to him. There's no inflection. There's no tonal inflection. There's no meaning behind what I'm saying. So this is why people get into arguments. And the guys out there know what I'm talking about. Your girl texts you something, you text her something back, she fucking flips out like a fucking nutcase. Fuck you, who you seeing, who you cheating on, motherfucker, this, that, and the third. It's because they're not hearing what you're saying. They're reading a fucking script that can be taken in 90 different directions. And that's what I'm getting at when I'm talking about transcripts. Transcripts don't give emphasis. They just A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and J. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's what transcripts do. And the other thing, the final thing to answer this is that not only do they talk to rats, not only are they relying on court transcripts, but they always have a fucking narrative. Most of these authors have an anti-crime narrative. The only one who I've ever seen The only one I've ever seen who doesn't seem to have that is TJ English. He just brings it. This is the facts. This is the story. And he's entertaining. And everything that he says is the truth. And he goes to extreme measures to talk to family members and do stuff like that. Jerry Capisci's not going to sit down with Angel Gotti. Jerry Capisci's not going to sit down with Deborah Merlino. Jerry Capisci's not going to sit down next to anybody else. He's going to get his shit from the cops. He's going to get his shit from the FBI. George Anastasia, please. Don't even get me started today on that prick. He's written nothing but book after book after book about rats. He don't talk to anybody of fucking consequence, believe me. Otherwise, I think he would be respected among street guys. Street guys don't respect him. They respect guys that tell the truth, but they respect guys that give them some sort of anonymity, if you will. So I think the reason why just rumors keep persisting is because who wants to hear the truth? Sometimes the truth is boring. One last example. John F. Kennedy gets shot by Lee Harvey Oswald. How entertaining is that? It's not. But then when you say Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy on the orders of Sam Giancana, Jimmy Hoffa, Santos Traficante, and then you add, and Jack Ruby was a gangster, and he walks into the jail a day before he kills Oswald to get the layout of the joint. Then the next day he goes back and pops him over. That's more entertaining, right? So the point is that I think that rumors sometimes are so, like last one. Michael Francis last week. I know who killed Marilyn Monroe. I know where Jimmy Hoffa's body is. That's entertaining. It's lies and it's bullshit and it's innuendo without facts or logic. That's entertaining. But if he just said, well, I heard that that's not entertaining. So I think that's why you continue to have this. And that's why I try to strive really fucking hard to be honest. If I don't know, I'm going to tell you I don't know. I'm not going to just try to bullshit my way through it. All right. Anything about the Gambino crime family in Baltimore? Was there any active families there in Maryland, Washington, D.C., or the Virginia area? Actually, there was. There was a Baltimore crew, which was a Gambino crime family operated crew from 1920 to about 1990. And it was a small faction of the Gambinos. They were originally totally independent until Vincent Mangano installed Louis Marici as capo over Baltimore. Most of the crew's existence was run by the Corby brothers, Vito, Pasquale, and Frank. They had about 10 guys, 50 associates. From 1900 to 1923, Vinny D'Urso was the boss. From 23 to 29, it was Vito Corby. From 29 to 55, it was Pasquale Corby. From 55 to 66, it was Louis Marici. From 66 to 1990, it was Frank Corby. To further answer your question, to my knowledge, there is no representation there. If you go to Baltimore, you kind of understand what I mean. But here's why Baltimore is important. It's a seaport. One of the things that I personally know that nobody has mentioned anywhere is that Carlo Gambino really ran the longshoremen's reunions from fucking Florida all the way to Maine. If he said put a stop to it, it got stopped. And I know that because I knew the guy who was the head of the Longshoremen's Union back in the 60s and 70s. He's in his late 70s, early 80s now. And he told me on any given day, if that phone were to call from New York and saying there's a ship that's coming in, leave it alone, that's exactly what he did. Does that make him corrupt? Absolutely, he was corrupt. And it almost got to the point, and I don't want to say his name, but his first name is Gary. We'll just say that. But he got so stressed out being sort of controlled by New York that he ended up losing his job because he just got drunk all the time. He couldn't deal with some of the shit that was going on. First of all, it's a high-stress job. Second thing is, you got a family, kids, and other shit. But then when you're dealing with the mob on a daily basis, dealing with seaports and longshoremen and making sure this truck takes this box and not that box, keeping the FBI, the government away. That's a high stressful thing, and I'm not laying off saying get drunk is the fucking right thing to do. But this guy was the fucking guy for like 30 years on the fucking docks, and he knew how to control shit. He told me a lot of cool stories. As far as the Mafia being in Maryland, Virginia, there is representation in Virginia Beach. I know that for a fact. It's mainly Sicilian. There's a lot of Russian mob there. There is a contingency of a Gambino guy here and there that has connections, but really going to Virginia, you got to look at your Giordano's and the Sicilians that are there, and obviously Eddie Garcia, who everybody knows, but I'm not going to really go into that. All right, who in the Gambinos did Shandor Burns work with? Burns really did more work with the Gambinos, and really sort of tongue-in-cheek. Where this comes from was he gave Danny Green a $75,000 loan. The loan was meant so Danny Green could open up a club or something like that. And what ends up happening is when the money is transferred from Burns' Gambino contact, somehow the money gets in the hands of Billy Cox, who was a numbers operator. And what he did was he took it and used it to buy drugs. In any event, the police end up raiding the house. They take the drugs and whatever is left of the money. So when the Gambinos come back and say, where the fuck is our money? Burns says, let me go see Danny Green. And Danny Green basically says, fuck you, I'm not going to pay it back, which started a war. But that's really the extent of that relationship. Shandor Burns knew a lot of people. He was important to a lot of people. He was a high earner. But to say that he was actively with them, it really isn't the absolute truth. All right. Any Mafia family taking over Howard Beach? The same mob crew that's been there will always be there. That's never going to change. Between Whitey Bulger and Greg Scarpa, who used the FBI best to their advantage? Which FBI handlers became more corrupt in their dealings with Scarpa/Bulger? Who is the bigger rat? Okay. I think Greg Scarpa probably used the FBI a hell of a lot more better to his advantage than Whitey Bulger did. I'm on the fence with Whitey Bulger, and there's a reason for it. I've talked about it before. I've met Whitey Bulger years and years and years and years and years ago. But like I've said earlier, Whitey Bulger wasn't ratting on Ray Patriarch. He was ratting on the Angelos. The Angelos actually bought into the Mafia. They didn't earn it. They bought into it. So they were not trusted. They were never trusted. They were the ones that were behind sort of the coup for Raymond Patriarca Jr. to get ousted from Boss. And that's going down a rabbit trail. I really want to stick to the facts here. But I think that Greg Scarpa probably used the FBI better to his advantage than anybody. I think the two FBI handlers that were the most corrupt, obviously, were Lynn Del Vecchio and John Connolly. Del Vecchio still fucking claims to this day he did nothing wrong, which is bullshit. He did. He doctored shit. However, John Connolly really doctored shit because Whitey Bulger wasn't giving John Connolly anything to fucking work with. You look at the 302s that came out of that, and I've seen them. I have stacks of them somewhere in this place, just because I was curious about the case. But 302s are often like hundreds of pages, one-line pages from John Connolly. So was John Connolly protecting Whitey Bulger? I think so, but not in the way that you think. I think Whitey Bulger used him to keep the FBI off his back, to let him just do what he needed to do. But Greg Scarpa got away with murdering people. Hands down, while getting an FBI paycheck. And the FBI fucking knew about it. Del Vecchio, in one case, gave Greg Scarpa the address of somebody who Scarpa then went and fucking killed. And so the question becomes, who was the bigger rat? In my opinion, Greg Scarpa was the bigger fucking rat. Whitey Bulger has his own thing going on. He's got a small crew. Who's Whitey Bulger going to really affect? 4 different people? 5? 6? 10? Greg Scarpa affected a whole entire crime family, and not just that one. So in my opinion, Greg Scarpa was a bigger rat, but I think as far as which agent was more corrupt, John Connolly or Lynn Del Vecchio, I think Del Vecchio was a lot more corrupt than John Connolly was. And John Connolly's sitting in prison, and Del Vecchio's not. You figure that one out. All right. I heard Philadelphia operates in Delaware, but no other family does. Is it true? No other families will set up in Delaware, D.C., and Maryland and Virginia because of law enforcement agencies that are headquartered there. From what I understand, there's a contingency in Delaware from Philadelphia. But I don't think that. First of all, you got to understand that how close Delaware is to Philadelphia. 15 minutes? It doesn't take much. My brother and I used to drive to Delaware to get liquor, right over the line. So when I was in Philly. So I don't think that there's not an organized crime group in D.C. or Maryland, Virginia, because of law enforcement agencies. But what the fuck is there? You go to Virginia Beach, it's got a shore, it's got hotels, it's got tourist rackets. That makes sense. Baltimore, the waterfront, that makes sense. Washington, D.C., I don't think anybody would touch. Like, you got the Greeks there. The Greek Mafia is there. So it's not like it's just that you got to start looking at places where people can make money. I know, for instance, a lot of the bingo halls in Virginia Beach are owned by the mob guys. Hey, as long as they give money to charity, who the fuck's going to ask a question? So I don't think it's because of law enforcement agencies. I just think that you're in a territory where you can make a lot of fucking money. D.C. is a bad area anyway. Obscure Maryland, what the fuck are they going to do? Shake down a motherfucker who's selling clams or crabs? So, you've got to look at territories where they can go to make money. Was there ever Italian mafia in territories like Georgia and Alabama? Of course there were. If you look at historically, and I'm going to just do this really quickly, Dallas had a crime family from 1920 to 1990. Denver, 1910 to 2006. It was the Roma crime family. Then the Carino brothers, Joe Roma. Then the Smaldone brothers. Birmingham, Alabama had a crime family that was there until 1938. Seattle has the Colacurcio crime family. Then you have the Dixie Mafia: Louisiana, Arkansas, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, and Mississippi. I don't want to get into the Dixie Mafia because they're a bunch of inbred rednecks. But yes, most states had some form of the mob by hook or by crook. But sometimes it's hard to sustain. All right. Do you think Chicago would be in its current shape with all the violence and shootings if the outfit still had control? Listen, times change. Chapo Guzman owns Chicago. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. Every drug that is in Chicago has direct, I believe it was something like 98% of all drugs that are in Chicago, Chapo Guzman's Sinaloa cartel put there. Chapo Guzman wanted Chicago to be his home away from home. I don't think that. First of all, the time period is different. First of all, if you go to like 1960s when Chicago was really, really high up, you didn't have 10-year-olds running the fucking streets with guns. Okay? And that's the reality and the evolution of society. Guns, regardless of what your stance is, are made too readily available. There's too many of them. I think that a 10-year-old would have been hard-pressed in 1961 to find a gun. And even if he did, his first thought isn't, I'm going to go shoot Tommy down the street because he looks funny. He's going to go out and shoot it in the fucking woods like kids do. Today is a different story entirely. I don't think even if Chicago had 1960s sort of tough guys, you can't control this. It's out of control. The cops aren't doing nothing there. What was it, 54 shootings like last weekend or some crazy shit? So no, I don't think the mob can't control 13-year-old maniacs with guns. You just can't. What are they going to do, kill kids? So I don't think that really. If this started happening in 1960, maybe they could get a stranglehold on it. But at this point, it's my foregone conclusion that there's nothing they can do. All right. In your opinion, was Frank Ballesteri behind the car bombing on Lefty Rosenthal? Absolutely. He was behind that. He was actually caught on wiretap saying that he was going to go after Lefty Rosenthal. He was going to make evens with him. And the reason why is they blamed him for a lot of the problems they were having out in Vegas. And that's mainly because once the Gaming Commission came in and tried to get rid of Lefty Rosenthal, he started opening his mouth a little bit too much, which is what directly led to them trying to kill him to begin with. Was Rosenthal an informant? I don't believe that to be the case. He could have spilled on everybody, and he really didn't. Tony Spilotro fucked that all up. Lefty Rosenthal definitely did not help. All right, with all the internal power struggles and civil wars in the Colombos and the Bonanos, did any of the other three families ever try to buy out, take over, or absorb them in any power? No, because who the fuck wants to touch them? If they can't stay off the radar, why the fuck would you want to absorb them? What's going to change? Listen, the Bonanno crime family has sort of been, and when I say sort of, I'll make my point clear. Since Joe Bonanno did what he did, that fucked them all up. Then you bring in Joey Massino. How do you recover quickly from that? And it seems like the two fucking crime families that seem to keep having this problem is the Bonannos. I don't understand it. Luck of the draw, you get a lot of rats that come in, but the Colombos have the same sort of problem. Why absorb it? First of all, you can't absorb it because there's going to be a war if you try to. And history, if history teaches us anything, it teaches us that the Colombo crime family has no bones, no ifs, ands, or buts about picking up a gun and using it. So I don't think it ever happened. It may have been something that was discussed at one point. But I think the reality is there's just no way that's going to happen. So, in your opinion, historically, which family has been the smallest and least powerful? Well, you're trying to get me killed with this question. All right, the smallest, least powerful. The DeCavalcantes in New Jersey. I can't, I don't know. First of all, none of the five families here are small. They've always had big numbers. Least powerful, I don't think a guy in New Jersey, let's take Sam the plumber, I don't think he can make a call and kill somebody in Florida. I think ultimately New York has a lot more of that power. I could be wrong, but I think that they have been hyped up to be something that they really weren't. But if I had to pick somebody from the five families, because I'm not sure what specifically you're talking about, probably least powerful. Ooh, man. See, it all depends on what time period we're talking about, too. Because each one of them could have a down time or a down period. So I can't really just pick one off the top of my head because it depends on which time period. If we're talking now, I think the Colombos. That's just my opinion. But then you go back to like 1960. It's a little bit different of a story. So I think it just depends on the time period. All right. When the mob set up Lepke, do you feel that it had just as much to do with opportunity to take over his rackets? Yeah, it had nothing to do with his rackets. Lepke was starting a lot of fucking problems, and I had like a bunch of notes on that, believe it or not, and I have no fucking idea where I actually put them. No. Hold on, I'm looking. All right, just off the top of my head. Now, Lepke had a lot of problems. Lepke really just could not stay out of certain situations. Ultimately, he was executed in the electric chair. And I think that the reality is that there was a power struggle. Sorry, I'm still looking for this damn fucking thing over here. Where'd it go? Okay. All right, so there's a few things. I know I was rambling there for a minute, but all right. First of all, Lepke had a huge narcotics operation going on, and he really had the corner market on it, so to speak, and a lot of people wanted a part of that. So on one hand, yeah, killing him or getting him off the streets and they could absorb his rackets would be profitable for them, but that's not ultimately why it happened. He had a narcotics trial in 1940. Then he gets indicted August 20th of 1940 on murder charges in Los Angeles for killing Harry Greenberg, who was also a close friend of Meyer Lansky, which created a conflict. Not knowing whether Meyer Lansky knew about it, but all of a sudden, Lepke gets mentioned in killing somebody that was close to Meyer Lansky. That's going to create friction. May 9th, 1941, he gets indicted for 4 more murders. He gets found guilty. He gets found guilty of that, which didn't help. And he knew too much about Murder Incorporated for his own good. He had too much information on too many people. Why they didn't just kill him in the streets, I will never understand. In 1935, Lepke was making $18 million per year, and that's not $18 million a year in 1930s. That's what it equates to today. He was making $18 million a year. He had 250 men under him. And another mistake he made is he actually killed a Brooklyn candy store owner named Joe Rosen. And he kills him because he believed that Rosen was giving information to Attorney General Thomas Dewey. And that created another problem. I think, looking back on it historically, I think if the Mafia could have gotten their hands on him, they would have killed him, because I think it would have benefited them sort of in the long run. But I think ultimately, the government stepped in and sort of took care of the mob's problem from that aspect. So all that being said, those are the questions that we got. I'm sure that people are still sending me shit as we speak. But I want to take a break really quick, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Ciro Terranova. It's going to jump back and forth a little bit with some time period stuff. There's a reason why I'm doing Ciro Terranova. He isn't your John Gotti. He isn't your Joey Merlino. He isn't your Al Capone. But he was in a time period that was very important. He was involved, obviously, in what is known as the Morello Crime Family, which became ultimately the Masseria crime family, back to the Morellos, to the Luciano crime family, ultimately to the Genovese crime family, which we know today. It's a part of history that doesn't get told very often, and it's an important part of history. There's a lot of treachery involved, a lot of smart stuff involved. So when we come back, we'll get into Ciro Terranova. In my travels, I'm always looking for a clothing brand that I feel like represents me. Anybody can go to a store and buy a t-shirt with a gimmick, but if you believe in 3 core values like I do, loyalty, honor, and respect, then look no further than Omerta brand clothing. You can catch them at omertamia.com, OMERTAMIA.com, with locations in Europe, California, Boston, Brooklyn, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Washington. They have a great clothing line with hats, shirts, sweatshirts, keychains, anything you might need, stickers. You want the rats to stop snitching? Go right out and get yourself a sticker. But if you want to live your life by the gentleman's code, look no further than Omerta brand clothing. And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. We are talking about Ciro Terranova and why this is important. And I'm probably going to do an entire series on this at some point, but I think it's important to see how mob families sort of, what the history of all of it is. The Trafficantes obviously didn't start as the Trafficantes. The Angelo Bruno or the Philadelphia Mafia, the Merlino Mafia, whatever you want to call it now, didn't obviously start with Joe, didn't start with Angelo. It starts from somewhere else. So I think it's important to know the history, and so that's why I picked Ciro Terranova. Now, a lot of people wanted me to do Greg Scarpa, and you know what? I'm going to be honest. I just couldn't. There's a lot of information, and I could talk about Greg Scarpa for days. But at the end of the day, the guy's a rat. And I have a real beef with doing a whole entire show about somebody like that. And I might at some point do it. I don't know what it is. Something just kind of drives me fucking sporadically nuts about that guy. Well, all right, let's just get to this show. All right, Ciro Terranova was born in Corleone, Sicily in 1888. Ciro arrived in New York with his family in 1893, along with his brothers Vincenzo, Niccolo, and Giuseppe, Joe, founded the Morello Crime Family. When they arrived in New York, they found making money and making ends meet nearly impossible, which a lot of, back in the old days, they said, oh, America's, the streets are paved with gold. They get here and they see the fucking slums of fucking East Harlem and they go, what the fuck is this? We didn't sign up for this. People are putting piss and shit in buckets and dumping it out the fucking windows. And so what ended up happening is they pick up and they move to Louisiana, where his father would end up planting sugarcane, and then he would try to take the profits from that and roll it into something else. And then they ended up moving with those profits to Bryan, Texas, where they worked as cotton pickers. After two years, some members of the family contract malaria, which is kind of creepy when you think about it. And then they returned to New York City in 1896. Ciro's father would open a plastering store with the profits from sugarcane fields, and Ciro and Vincenzo would work there on nights and weekends to make a couple extra bucks, and Ciro would later be a waiter at his brother Joe's restaurant, which was adjacent to the Prince Street Saloon. In 1903, Joe would be charged with the Barrel murders, but would be released due to lack of evidence. Barrel murder was a method the mob used to dispatch problems. Likely, it probably originated from Sicily. The actual first recorded barrel murders in the United States took place in New York City in 1895. And usually the victims were Italian. They were immigrants who would be found stuffed inside a barrel after being shot, stabbed, or strangled. The barrel would then be left on a random street corner, a back alley, or even shipped to a fake address in another city or another state. Obviously, we know from history the last guy that this seemed to have happened to was Johnny Roselli, who was found in a 55-gallon drum floating off Biscayne Bay. There were others that this happened to as well. After the barrel trials ended in June of 1903, the brothers continued to undergo police searches and nonstop harassment. Ignazio the Wolf Lupo and Joe Terranova would end up getting pinched for counterfeiting and would be sent to prison. Ciro would step in along with his brother Vincent and Nick. Very quickly they rose in stature, controlling Italian Harlem and later running the now named Morello Crime Family. Now, I don't want there to be a ton of confusion about this. Joe was really the head fucker. He ends up going to prison. When he goes into prison, obviously his brothers step up. Nick sort of kind of takes over a little bit, but Ciro's really the guy with the power at the time. But he just kind of, he just kind of steps out of the shadows and lets Nick do his thing. Maybe we should call it a front boss type of situation, because that's what it was. Ciro's longevity at the top wasn't going to last very long, but everything that he went through in his short span is just incredible. All right, some background on the Morello crime family. The founder obviously was Joe Morello, and he came to New York City in 1892 with his family. Okay, Giuseppe's relationship with Ciro, they were stepbrothers. Prior to being the Morello crime family, they were known as the 107th Street Mob, which dominated East Harlem, Manhattan, and the Bronx. Joe Morello's strongest ally was Ignazio the Wolf Lupo, who was a mobster who controlled Little Italy and Manhattan. The Morello-Lupo alliance prospered. But then in 1903, they began to counterfeit money with Vito Cascioferro, and they were printing $5 bills in Sicily and then smuggling them back into the United States. In 1909, a bunch of police officers raided a building owned by the Morellos and found a counterfeiting machine, American money and Canadian money. 15 guys were arrested, and Ignazio and Joe were sentenced to 30 years in prison. They wouldn't serve 30 years, but that was the sentence. And then that's the reason why that they actually went away. And this is what sort of brings Ciro to the forefront, along with his brother Nick and Vincenzo. Ciro would get the name. He would get the nickname at this time of the Artichoke King for purchasing artichokes at $6 a crate from California and then selling them in New York City for a 30 to 40% profit. Ciro also had a violent temper and reputation. His reputation preceded him. He would not hesitate. He would shake down vegetable buyers into buying his artichokes, and if they didn't, bad shit would happen. In 1916, Joe DeMarco, who owned several gambling dens, challenged the power of Ciro, Nick, and the entire Morello crime family. What you need to understand about this time period is we have a tendency of thinking in terms of The Godfather. I hate to use this reference, but who's going to mess with the Corleone crime family? What are they, nuts? Nobody, right? Problem was, back in these days, yes, you had a lot of power base, but there were so many other criminal groups that were involved in organized crime in these days, especially in Manhattan and New York City, that really on a Monday it could be Al Capone, on a Tuesday it could be Johnny Fradiano. It doesn't fucking matter. These things changed daily, weekly, so the idea that someone was going to challenge them really was nothing new. DeMarco his sole purpose was he wanted lucrative rackets and was not going to sit idly by. Ciro wanted DeMarco dead, and Ciro would actually go so far as to contract the hit to Leo Laurinaido, who was the Navy street gang leader. And Loretano at the time said, let me give this to somebody else. And they actually handed it off to a guy named Mike Fetto. Fetto would end up going to DeMarco's club, but he couldn't either recognize DeMarco or he just wasn't sure, so he left without doing anything. Then the job was given to John. Johnny left Esposito, with Fetto playing wingman. Esposito also couldn't seem to find DeMarco in the club, so instead he just said fuck it and whacked somebody else named Charles Lombardi, which created some problems. DeMarco would then counterstrike. In November of 1915, Nick Terranova was shot in the back with a sawed-off shotgun. That's no fucking joke. How anybody can live from that is, I don't get it. Nick was actually seriously hurt but would go on living. And then all of a sudden, there was sort of a brewing war between DeMarco and the Terranovas. Then DeMarco doubles down, and he pushes deeper into downtown. He opened a restaurant at 163 West 49th, followed by two gambling rooms. One was on Mulberry Street, the other was on 54 James Street. This was Terranova Morello territory. Now, if you're getting confused about the names here, Joe, whose last name was Morello, was stepbrother to Terranova. So the Terranovas and Morellos related, so don't get confused there. But DeMarco ends up putting rackets on Mulberry Street and 54 St. James, which was all lower Manhattan, and it effectively was Morello territory. July 20th of 1916, Fetto walked into DeMarco's club with Esposito and shot him in the face and head 12 times. A little overkill, but funny in a sense, too. How many times you shoot him? 12. Why 12? Well, he wasn't moving after about the first 4. The reason for this was multi-tiered. The first thing is Morellos weren't going to allow encroachment into their territory. Nick Terranova had been shot, so there's the retribution factor. His death, the death of DeMarco was actually sanctioned, because you got to understand something. Back in these days, it was different. The Camorra ran a lot of stuff. It was some European type of shit, but the death was also sanctioned by the Neapolitan Camorra head and by the Sicilian Mafia, who wanted to divide Manhattan. So they had a vested interest in seeing DeMarco killed because they wanted to divide up the rackets in Manhattan, get one prick out of the way, and we can spread the wealth. However, without the power of Joe at the helm and without the ferociousness of Ignazio Lupo at the helm or at the control of the family, they sort of begin to wean a bit, especially after the DeMarco hit, and John Esposito, who is the one who killed DeMarco, ends up fucking talking to the cops. He rats on Ciro, who would actually be indicted for 2 murders, but it would be dropped because New York law at the time, and God, what a beautiful law this is. And this is the way it should be today, but it's not. The law stated then that the testimony by a co-conspirator and or accomplices cannot be considered outside corroboration was needed. So you needed somebody who had no criminal fucking involvement and no part of the murder to step forward and say, that motherfucker did it. Without that, fuck it, you couldn't do a thing. It's not the way it operates today, but that's the way it operated back then. Gaetano Rina, who was a capo within the Morellos, was pretty unhappy, and what he ends up doing is he notices that without Joe Morello and Ignazio Lupo, he sees that Ciro Terranova has a couple of power problems, and he uses that to his advantage to separate the family. And he just basically takes a bunch of crew guys with him and moves to the Bronx and starts his own thing. As a result, Nick Terranova tries to do what Lucky Luciano ends up doing a couple years later, and he tries to unify all of organized crime. He sees where it's going. He sees the trappings of what's going on, and he wanted everybody to kind of come together. But at that point, it was fucking open season, open territory, and nobody would budge, but he did try. The Morellos then align with a prominent East Harlem businessman and Camorra member, Giasu Gallucci, who was the key to the local political power in the area. And I've said this a million times, Political power means everything. If you cannot control the polls, you cannot control the city government, you don't own shit. You can't control a fucking fly farting in fucking Egypt. He also aligned with the Lamonte brothers, but it would be short-lived as Gallucci would be killed in 1915 and Charles Lamonte would be killed in 1914. So Ciro's not having any fucking luck here. In 1916, Camorra boss Pellegrino Marano and Lieutenant Vincenzo Paragallo begin to encroach into Morello territory. So once again, we're seeing these guys aren't taking the Morellos seriously, especially without Joe at the helm or Ignacio Lupo. So they all keep just taking shots. So for 6 months, they went to war until Marano offered a truce. Sadly, Nick Terranova, I don't know. Obviously, I didn't fucking know him. Obviously, he wasn't too bright because he agrees to go to a meeting at the Navy Street Cafe, which was owned by a Camorra member named Alessandro Valero. He obviously didn't think enough about the situation because what happens is he gets ambushed by 5 members of the Brooklyn Camorra and was killed with his bodyguard Charles Ubriaco. Ciro immediately is livid and wants retribution, but Camorra boss Pellegrino Marano was quickly arrested for the actual murder and charged with the hit. Otherwise, I think Ciro would have gone after him. However, there's another problem. 2 informants, one named Tony Natoro and Ralph Daniello, ratted both the Sicilian and the Camorra out. That's how Pellegrino Marano was arrested for the hit on Nick Terranova. Was these 2 guys who were involved ratted everybody out. The Mafia Camorra War would end in 1917, and Ciro sorry. The Camorra War would end in 1917, and somehow Ciro was able to sort of manage to keep a control and a grip on his family and the few rackets that they did have. Many former Brooklyn Camorra members actually jumped ship and joined the Morello Crime Family. Once the Camorra War ended, a lot of guys were looking for new guys to go be with, and so what ends up happening is for everybody that Ciro Terranova lost when his captain left and went to the Bronx, he sort of kind of gets back from Camorra guys who are disgruntled. Back in 1916, Joe Masseria was released from prison. He had done 3 years for burglary after robbing the Bowery pawn shop, and he was considered an up-and-coming guy. The problem was he wanted to control everything. He had ambitions at a very young age, and ultimately I think most people who listen to my show know where that is heading. But in 1920, Joe Morello and Ignacio Lupo get released from prison, as was Salvatore D'Aquila, who was now a Manhattan boss, but he was also a former captain of the Morellos. D'Aquila feared that his power would be reduced, and he wanted Lupo and Morello dead. Once again, we see, Joe Morello and Ignacio Lupo come out of prison, and D'Aquila can't fucking deal with it. He wants to keep his power base, and the only way to do that is to try to kill him. Masseria, on the other hand, also wanted power, as did D'Aquila. Umberto Valenti, who was one of D'Aquila's men, had gone on the lam after infuriating D'Aquila. He knew that he was in dangerous territory and knew he was probably going to be killed, but he offers to take out anybody who's a threat. Valenti would go on to try to kill Joe Masseria, but fucked that up 4 times. I don't know how. He's got the Vinny Gigante disease, apparently, 4 times. December 29th of 1921, Masseria's crew whacked Salvatore Morro on Christie Street. Valenti then kills Vincent Terranova, which totally cripples the Morello crime family. So now you've got 2 brothers left. You've got Ciro and you've got Joe. Ciro immediately orders Masseria to go and kill Valenti. Joe Masseria then orders his crew, led by a young Lucky Luciano, to hit them. Luciano ends up ambushing Silva Tagliagamba and Valenti on the corner of Grand and Mulberry. Tagliagamba died, and Valenti ended up escaping. But then on August 11th of 1922, Luciano gets a good shot off and ends up killing Valenti. The problem for Ciro at that point was that Masseria showed leadership and balls, and he really wanted to branch out on his own. He saw weakness in Terranova's and Joe Morello. He saw weakness in Ignazio Lupo. He saw weakness in Ciro Terranova. And so he starts to kind of plot and subplot here. And what ends up sort of happening is guys in that family start to recognize things. The fact that Masseria was willing to fight forced many of Ciro's men to go with Masseria. And when I mean go, I mean to side with him. Because you know how it is. There's like a whisper campaign going on, this, that, and the third. And they end up sort of telling Masseria, no, we're with you. These guys are leading us in the wrong direction. And there would sort of kind of be a split. Ciro maintained control of the 116th Street crew, but ultimately Masseria would move himself and his fucking men to the Bronx. And Masseria at that point was sort of kind of known as the boss, but like I said, things were kind of split. So you had Joe and Ciro on one hand, and on the other you have Joe the Boss Masseria. December 7th of 1929, the board of directors of the Tepecano Democratic Club threw a banquet in honor of Judge Vitale at the Roman Gardens in the Bronx, which was then Masseria territory. Over 70 guests attended this, including Ciro, 6 of his gunmen, numerous political figures, police officers, and friends. While Vitale was giving his speech at 1:30 in the morning, 7 gunmen entered the dining room and held the joint up, taking money and jewelry. It was widely believed that Ciro staged the robbery to steal back a murder contract that he had signed. This is where it gets a little gray. I don't know if the murder contract was there. I doubt it, but I think he was sending a sort of statement to people. The contract that we're discussing was for $30,000 to murder Frankie Yale and Frankie Marlowe. Ciro paid the hitman prior with the advance of $5,000 and the other $25,000 due after the hit. The problem was the hitmen were not paid after they got rid of Frankie Yale and Frankie Marlowe. And they ended up making threats. They threatened to inform the police. And it was said that Ciro did this to not only make a statement, but to sort of negate the contract itself. While the Castellamare War was ongoing, Joe Valachi ended up trying to patch up his friend with Ciro Terranova. They had been friends at one point, but the problem is Ciro never really trusted Valachi. Something about Valachi bothered him. Valachi would go so far as to befriend Ciro's driver, Tommy Gagliano, who would eventually later become known as boss of the Lucchese's. And what ends up happening is what's historical about this, and in many cases. Valachi was effectively with a guy by the name of Gaetano Reina, who ordered Valachi to kill Tommy Gagliano. Valachi didn't want to do it. He sort of liked Tommy. So what he does instead is he kills Joseph Catania, who was actually Ciro Terranova's nephew. At the funeral, Ciro pretty much let it be known that Joe Valachi was a fucking dead man, and anybody that had any involvement was fucking dead. And then not long later, Peter Morello, who was another brother of the Morellos, gets killed by Albert Anastasia and Frank Scalish. In 1930, Joe Morello was killed alongside Joe Periano while collecting cash receipts outside his East Harlem office. Valachi is the one who is responsible for killing Joe Morello. The minute that Joe Morello goes, Ciro's got a real big problem. And a lot of the problem is that he doesn't have people don't fear him. For whatever reason at this point. They did when he was younger. They don't fear him now. On April 15th of 1931, Masseria gets whacked. Ciro's hatred for Masseria was so intense, he insisted on driving the hit team to and from the murder. The problem was that after the hit took place, he was so freaked out he couldn't put the car in gear. His hands were shaking, he was sweating profusely, and when word hit the streets that he was shaky after a murder, the streets no longer worried about him. Because this is a guy that had killed people himself. This is a guy that was trying to lead a crime family. And he had over the years opportunities to take over, and he did for short periods of time. But the reality is that after this huge hit of Masseria, and we know the whole story of why Masseria got hit and who was behind that and the emphasis for that. I don't want to go into that. But the fact that he was shaky like that, people don't fear you then. He's soft. Look at him. He's shaking like a fucking wet dog. And once that hit the streets, he was done. He was done. He was done. In fact, not just 6 months later, Terranova ends up dying of a stroke. So the Morellos went from the Morellos to the Masserias to the Luciano crime family, and ultimately, at the end of the day, to the Genovese crime family. That's how they became the Genoveses. Of course, I could go through the whole entire catalog of how that happened. But the reason why I wanted to tell this story of Ciro Terranova isn't because he was some John Gotti, or it wasn't because he had all these fucking accolades that made him the most insane gangster. But he lived through the fucking Neapolitan Camorra War. He dealt with the Castellamare War. He dealt with Joe Masseria. He dealt with fucking all of these different factions. And he ended up dying at a relatively, I believe he was 49 years old when he died of a stroke. The stress got to him or whatever. But this is a guy that probably was never meant to run a crime family, and he had to do it by proxy because his brother Joe goes to prison. And he was able to maintain control of the rackets that they had. Now, he was a brutal guy when he was young. But I think that there are people that are designed to be leaders and those that are designed to be followers. And I don't think Ciro in any kind of imagination was a follower. But I think that the minute that Joe Masseria says, you know what, I think I want this for myself. I'm going to take my guys and me. We're going to go to the Bronx. And guys leave. And now all of a sudden Ciro gets whatever's left over of the Camorra. You know, listen, I'm not a big fan of Joe Masseria. I've said it 100 times. But you have to also look at him creatively and think, this guy saw something that he knew was a detriment to his own safety and to his men. He was able to recognize that Ciro Terranova wasn't mentally tough. You can be physically strong and you can order people to kill people, but doing it yourself and taking it all on your shoulders is a totally different beast. And I think he recognized early on that as long as Joe Morello was still alive and Ignazio Lupo were still alive, he couldn't take over. So I think there's a really good argument for saying that he was definitely behind, most definitely 100% behind Joe Morello getting whacked. Because he knew once he gets Joe out the way, Ciro is easy pickings. Because Ciro is not the tough guy. He's not the brute. He's not the guy that can control an army. When Ciro speaks, the army doesn't listen. And that's the problem. And that's what makes sort of Ciro Terranova's story sad, in a sense, is that he was the wrong guy for the job. But he lived through a lot of history. I mean, he lived through some serious shit. He was able to maintain control of a lot of things. And what I find most appealing about his life is that he essentially, at one point, with his brother Joe, was the head of what would become the Genovese crime family. Now, granted, that was like years ahead of time, or further on down the road. But that's how the Genoveses came into power, through Joe Morello. Joe Masseria, Luciano takes over, then from Luciano straight to the Genoveses. So I once got a question about, name changes for mob families and why did they change. First of all, Vito Genovese was a fucking egomaniac, and of course he was going to name it after himself. But maybe, perhaps, it should have stayed the Luciano crime family as a sort of honor to Lucky Luciano. But I think at that point the mob was so done with Lucky Luciano, they looked at him as if he was yesterday's goods. And that's the reality of the life. You can be a hot fucking commodity today, tomorrow forget about it. You're nothing. You're Nicky Potato Salad. You know what I mean? So that's sort of the story about Ciro Terranova. Now, here's what we got coming up. At some point, I'm going to talk to Patrick Borriello, the actor, son of Bobby Borriello. I've got a couple other people lined up. We're going to launch the website in the fall, which is going to be great because you're going to get all the radio shows there. I'm not sure if I'm going to still put them on YouTube, but if I do, they'll still be there. But the site's going to be really fantastic. I've already started kind of looking at things, so that's going to be cool. We're going to do some film stuff too, which is really cool. And there's some other neat stuff that we're going to do, some live stuff. We're going to do more t-shirt giveaways and stuff like that. So we got a lot going on. Just got to be a little patient. Let's get through the fucking summer heat. Get to the fall where the wind blows. We can get a lot more done. But as usual, you can follow me at Twitter at RealMobTalk7. Definitely go out and check out TJ English, the author. He wrote Havana Nocturne, which is one of the best Mafia books I've ever read in my life. You can visit us on Facebook. Just type in Mob Talk Radio. And just keep supporting. You want to send a threat, complaint, hatred, whatever it is you need to send, go ahead and send it. You can hit me up on Twitter or Facebook or what have you. Okay, yeah. Also, somebody asked me this. Once we move to the new site, am I going to lose all the content from the other one? No, because there's a plugin that I can use that will transfer. It will basically redirect everybody to the new site, so you don't have to worry about that. But definitely submit your questions. I mean, if you've got a question and I have time to answer it, I definitely will. But we're going to try to do a lot of Q&As. I like the questions because it allows me to just talk about a bunch of different stuff. And you can ask me oddball weird shit. I mean, come on. Somebody last week asked me about fucking pineapple on a fucking pizza, for Christ's sake. So, anyway, that's the show for this week. We will be back next week with an all-new show. Like I said, send your complaints, your threats, whatever you want. You know where to send them. So, have a great weekend, everybody. It's supposed to be a fucking hot one here in the city. So, all that being said, we will check everybody out next week. We'll have an all-new show. I like doing the Q&A, so I'm going to do a lot of those. So maybe a portion of every show I'll answer questions. I think it's appropriate, and I think that's a good thing to do. So, have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you next week.